Hello, and welcome to Stepping Stones to Getting Started in Accessibility. I am Rachael, and along with Kate and Sharon, we're going to be talking about how you can really start to move from learning about accessibility to getting experience and really growing confidence in your accessibility. I'm going to start with a quick background, and then Kate is going to talk about opportunities in higher education and teach access and study away. Sharon's going to talk about Access U and the Accessibility Internet Rally, otherwise known as AIR. And I'm going to talk about the Accessibility Mentoring Program. We're going to briefly talk about how you can get involved, and then we're going to answer questions. And I believe we've left a good amount of time for questions so we can have a good conversation about this. As background, when the three of us started, really the pathway to becoming an accessibility professional was a little more informal than it is turning into right now. We started as developers, as UX engineers, or in some other related career, and often shifted into accessibility. Often were self-taught. And really, there weren't a lot of formal certifications or formal education available. But with the International Association of Accessibility Professionals starting a certification program and more programs picking up, we really see a need to help people get from that point, from having a certification, from having really great base knowledge, to growing their experience and becoming more and more confident. And I hear a lot in my position, the question, how do I take that next step? And particularly from individuals who are switching careers and trying to figure out how to become expert enough to start getting a new job and making that switch or moving on up in their careers. So we really want to talk about this community that's forming, and it's partly the three nonprofits that are talking today, but it's also the broader accessibility community as a whole. And I think they are coming together to provide that pathway forward to help emerging experts grow their skills. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you so much, Rachael. I'm really happy to be here today with you and Sharon. Hello to everyone out there joining us and everyone who will be viewing this later. My name is Kate Sonka. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Teach Access. So before I kind of get into what is Teach Access, I wanted to briefly talk a little bit about this idea around opportunities in higher education. And that can mean any number of things. But in this case, I'm using the word opportunity to think about growth areas for us to develop these pathways in accessibility. So depending on where you are or what you're doing, you potentially could have read this piece from Kristen Shinohara and others that was published in 2018. And we have a link to that at the end of our slide deck if you'd like to read that. But they did some work around examining who is teaching accessibility in higher education. Specifically in the US is what we're talking about here. They ended up surveying about 300 institutions, and of those, just about 50% were teaching it. And certainly there's more detail in the article. I really encourage you to take a look at that. But that means there's a lot of opportunity for growth. That's only a snapshot, of course, just 300 institutions. We know there's thousands in the US, so imagine what that means in terms of the number of students who aren't being introduced to these concepts. Coupling that with a survey that our friends at PEAT did, and actually they're presenting right now in another room about their work with XR, but PEAT is the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology. And they did a survey a number of years ago or they were surveying top tech companies, technology companies, asking a number of questions. Likewise, this survey is linked at the end of our slides. But one of the questions I wanted to call out, or one of the stats here, is that of these top tech companies, and I'm talking the large ones out in Silicon Valley, for example, or Seattle, of those companies, 60% of them said it was difficult or very difficult to find job candidates with accessibility skills. And so this led to what is called, what some of us are referring to as the accessible technology skills gap, really meaning companies want to hire people, recent graduates or interns, who have some level, some base understanding of accessibility, but they can't find enough students or recent graduates who have that. And so that's really where Teach Access was born out of. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is Teach Access? So we were created, and thank you to everyone who's been giving us shout outs. I've caught a couple sessions here and people have given us a nod. So appreciate everyone out there who has given us a shout out. But we were founded about 2016. And it was out of these conversations around how do we close this accessible technology skills gap. And industry said, well, I think we start working with higher ed, and we definitely need to make sure that our disability advocacy organizations are involved in this as well, working with us, alongside us, together. And the idea really being, how do we introduce and infuse basic concepts of accessibility into the higher ed curriculum? So the idea is very much about breadth more than depth. That's not to say that it's not crucially important that we have accessibility experts who are able to really handle some of those juicy questions around how do we make things accessible. But we're really looking at, what if we can reach 1 million students by 2030? What would that mean for just industry in general? Yes, the tech industry, but also other industries, financial, automotive, healthcare, et cetera. What would it mean for your companies if you were hiring students, recent graduates, who at least knew a little bit about accessibility, so that as they're sitting down to begin a product or a design process, they know that accessibility and disability needs to be considered from the beginning. Certainly there'll be a moment where maybe they won't know how to handle something. That's where our experts come in. But having this level of sort of the general knowledge around this, awareness raising is what we're after. Next slide, please. And so as Teach Access, as an organization, we're doing this in a number of ways. But specifically for the purposes of this presentation, I wanted to highlight our Study Away program. So in thinking about building these pathways for students to start to learn about accessibility, back in 2018, we developed this program. It's an immersive experiential learning program. So if you're familiar with the term study abroad, where students in the US might travel to other countries to study, it's kind of the same as that, although a study away is leaving their home institution to study somewhere in the US. And that's really where this was born out of. How could we create, and we did create, an immersive experiential learning program where students were spending time being directly engaging with accessibility experts in the industry. In 2018 is the first time we ran it, and then we ran it again in 2019. It was in person. Students from a variety of different universities traveled out to Silicon Valley for a week, and they met with, over the course of that week, about 7 to 8 companies, got to be on those campuses, talk to the accessibility teams, learn about the recruiting process, et cetera, et cetera. Really get a sense for what would it be like to work for some of these companies. And that was really great. Of course, 2020, we had to pause all activity. And then in last year, 2021, we took the program virtual. And this had always been a plan for us as a way to expand this program. Because of course, in person, we're a little bit more limited to the number of people we could have. Virtually, we can reach more. And so for those first 2 years, we had about 25 to 30 students. Last year, we had about 80 students. We are prepared and are just about to open the application for this 2020 virtual offering. And we hope to double that at least with students attending. And I can talk more maybe during Q&A if people are curious about what that actually looks like. But certainly from this, we've seen students who've secured internships and jobs some of whom are working now in some of these companies. It's not the expectation by any means, but the idea is really that it gives students a chance to kind of understand what would this work look like, what could this work look like. And we certainly have future plans to expand it both in person when it's safe to do so again, as well as virtually to other cities, maybe offering more than once a year, and definitely considering to work on this pipeline piece. So what happens once a student is connected with industry? How do we help support those relationships? And certainly there's more I could say about this program, more about the work that Teach Access is doing. We can save that for Q&A, or you can check it out on our site, which is teachaccess.org. But now I'd love to turn it over to my colleague, Sharon.
Thank you, Kate. I love Teach Access. I've been involved there for a couple of years now, and I think the goals are just so fantastic. My name is Sharon Rush. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Nobility. We've been in the nonprofit accessibility space for a lot of years. We were founded in 1999. Our mission is to create an inclusive digital world for people with disabilities, and we do that through these three related sets of programs. One is the area of awareness, making people understand what is accessibility, why does it matter? And a key program of that is the Accessibility Internet Rally, or AIR. And the truth is, we were doing the AIR program as a community collaboration before we founded Nobility. So for a couple of years here in Austin, Texas, we created an accessible web design contest because I was working at Easter Seals trying to find employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And what we found was that as our little town of Austin turned into a tech center, opportunities were opening for most people to pursue tech careers, but for people with disabilities, these barriers existed. And in order to address those barriers, we thought, well, if we want the tech sector to pay attention, we better do something competitive, right? Because these are competitive people. They want to be the smartest people in the room. They want to shine. So we said, hey, all you smart tech folks, learn about accessibility. We'll give you some training in digital accessibility, and then you'll show off your skills by making websites for nonprofit organizations. That's how we got started. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how you can get involved, but it's that awareness that we started with. And then we moved to education, where we really try to help people understand more deeply about what are the techniques and the different aspects of accessibility that people can learn about and apply to their own work. A few years after we founded Nobility, people were asking for training, more and more training. So we started a conference called Access U that happens every May. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And we also, over time, were asked to provide accessibility services. So we also do consulting and training work. So on the next slide, if we can move to that, I'll tell you that Access U this year in 2022, we're going to be back in person as Kate talked about, as nonprofit trying to move your programs from what you're used to doing in person. Suddenly we're trying to do it in a virtual world, which is what we've done with Access U for the last 2 years. One thing that we found when we did that as a virtual program, though, was that people could participate who were unable to participate previously. So we will continue to offer a very robust remote training activity, but we will convene again in person in 2022, May 9 through 13. And I think one of the things that distinguishes Access U is that we are very, very focused on training. So you come there, of course, to network and to meet people and to share ideas and to have fun, because we try to make everything we do, we try to bring the joy of this work to the community activities that we do. And so we teach these practical skills across the 4 tracks that are listed here: coding and testing, design and UX, content, and policy and management. I think you go to Access U really for practical reasons. to gain experience, but you will also meet and connect to the community in a really unique and, we think meaningful way, because you forge those relationships that then support your career as you move forward and move through it. Next, please. The Accessibility Internet Rally, as I mentioned, it's our origin story. And we continue to do it. So the first one was held in 1998. We did another one in 1999, and we started Nobility after that, especially to be a home for the AIR competition, because people were starting to say, hey, can you bring AIR to Boston, to Denver, to San Francisco? And so we've again modified it some through the pandemic. We have a very strong remote participation. In fact, I don't know if we'll ever go back to just being all in person anymore, because it really lends itself well to online participation. And I think if there was a silver lining to the pandemic, it was the fact that we became really aware that remote participation in school, in work, in civic and social activities really have made a difference in the lives of people with disabilities, who can now participate in things that were much more difficult to participate in previously. So the fact that we have gatherings like this one, and thanks to DQ and all the people who put on AXCON, because it really brings the community together. And that's, what all three of us are here to talk about, this community of support that will support your learning and your progress in your career, and just your contribution and sharing in this community that is so dedicated to digital accessibility. And that's how AIR started. We wanted to do something where people aren't motivated because, oh, it's legal, you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get sued, that people wanted to participate because, hey, this is a creative challenge. I want to learn how to do this. I want to get these skills because I can include more people. I can distinguish myself in my career. So we recruit nonprofit organizations, artists, people who need either an upgrade or a new website. We recruit teams of web professionals who are going to be the competitors. We give everybody the basic accessibility training. We also assign each team a mentor who helps them then make the plan, because it's a very short runway. They have to create a fully functioning website that meets accessibility requirements in 6 weeks. And during that time, they have a mentor to help them. They submit their work. It's judged by some of the world's best practitioners, people who have been doing this for a long time. Many of them here from DQ, from other professional organizations, and a lot of nonprofit participation. So AIR is really fun. It's just a really great way to celebrate the joy of learning about this, honing your skills, and helping the community at the same time. I think that's me, isn't it? I can answer questions in the QA, but I think it's over to you, right?
I think it
Rachael?
is. Let's see. Yep. So thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Kate. And thank you for joining me for this talk and letting me speak with you. You both have fantastic nonprofits, and it is, as they mentioned, exciting to really start coming together as a community and talking about this in a very holistic way. I'm the executive director for Accessible Community, and we are a newer nonprofit, actually a 501(c)(3) charity that its mission is really to nurture disability inclusive communities. So our focus is a little different. It is around helping smaller organizations that can't afford accessibility assistance become more accessible. So a little similar to AIR there. It's also focused though on helping people with disabilities find those organizations, because that's one of the gaps that when we did market research, we really found was kind of there, is that people are willing to do the work if they can see that benefit. And so we're creating a lot of free tools and free resources and programs to help solve those problems. And then part of that ecosystem is also helping emerging experts to grow their expertise. So we have a new tool that's coming out this week, and you can check it out, though it's very much just a framework and a little bit of content right now, but over the next week or two, it will be growing with more resources and content coming. And that is ta11y.org. It is a tool where a small organization can come in and really self-assess their own accessibility, or they can request someone to assist them with that accessibility assessment. And it's not just web, it's actually web and facilities and events and social media. So it is not, it's not a robust tool in the perspective of the larger accessibility tools. It's really more of a guided study to using the free tools that all of our wonderful community makes available to do accessibility assessment for someone who's novice, who's learning. And we've also structured it in a way to let people dive into more and more resources as they go through and learn more and more about it if they want to. So it's as much a teaching tool as anything. We also provide the accessible escape room, which will be hopefully coming to different conferences as we move back to in person, and we do the accessibility mentoring program. So the accessibility mentoring program is currently in its second run. It runs for 6 months at a time. It starts in January and July. We will begin advertising again for the July session, July rotation in April, but you can apply now, and I'll share the link for that. If you are interested in being a protege, if you're interested in being a mentor, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about that. The program's really designed to maximize impact in a very small amount of time, because all of the individuals I know who are senior in accessibility and been working in that field really want to work with people who are learning, but we're also busy. And that seems to be a real trend across all of us. There's so much work that needs to be done in this area. And so we've designed a program where you meet for an hour to 2 hours once or twice a month. That is between the mentor and the protege, how frequently the meetings happen. But we provide discussion prompts. We provide topics for conversation. We provide exercises that happen outside of the program so that when you come together, that time is really effective and efficient and as helpful as possible to the protege who's involved. And it's very much a program where the more you put into it, the more you get out of it, because there are these optional exercises to do between it. And we provide access to some of those small organizations who need help. And one of the activities, for example, is that a protege can go assess that particular organization's website and then come back to their mentor and go through their assessment. And that kind of really detailed real world feedback, we just hear how valuable that really is in growing confidence and finding things that you didn't know. And so it's really an opportunity to work with someone who knows what they're doing, but is also passionate about that field, and to share the passion both ways. And having done the mentoring, I have to say it's as exciting for the mentor as it is for the protege. You always get a chance to learn something new when you get a chance to kind of step out of the daily routine. We have fantastic partners, DQ, Level Access, Pearson, TPGI, and Nobility and Tetralogical are both contributing for members as well. We want to grow that pool. So if you're interested as an organization in contributing mentors, reach out to me as well. And if you're interested in being a protege, go ahead and apply. We have some plans for expansion to provide opportunities to people who we aren't able to necessarily match, but who could still benefit from some interaction and some one-on-one work. And those plans we're going to be rolling out soon. But my hope is that will give opportunities for people we aren't able to match, because in reality, there are right now more proteges than mentors. Hopefully, though, we will continue to kind of track who has applied and make sure everyone gets matched at some point as quickly and as soon as possible. So that is the programs. I want to talk a little about how to get involved, in particular for Study Away. It is teachaccess.org/initiatives/study-away. To get more involved in Access U is nobility.org/programs/AccessU-2022. To get involved or learn more about the Accessibility Internet Rally is nobility.org/programs/AIR, AIR. And then to get involved in the Accessibility Mentoring Program, either as a protege or a mentor, is accessiblecommunity.org/mentoring. And those links are in the slide deck, so feel free to go to that slide deck and you can go directly to those areas. Now, as I said when we started, we left a lot of time for questions and conversation. We are happy, all of us, when we were preparing this presentation, said how happy we are to talk at length about our programs and what we're doing. So we hope we have that opportunity now.
And I just wanted to add another resource, or do we have that? That slide's after the questions?
Yep. So there are some additional resources, and if we don't have questions right away, we could certainly start by talking about some of those.
All right, excellent. Well, we do in fact have some questions, so let's get into them. First question here is, can you provide links to where someone can get more experience in accessibility as a career change?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I haven't run into those in specifically. Have either of you?
The first one, this is Kate speaking. The first one that comes to mind is a11yjobs.com. I think it's .com. That would be a literal job change to get involved. But yeah, if you're interested more in kind of like learning about it, the WC3 has great resources. I mean, even, the programs that Sharon and Rachael talked about, trying to perhaps join the mentoring program, get involved in AIR, is a good way to also learn, or attend Access U. I don't know, Sharon, do you have other ideas?
Well, I think the attending conferences like this or Access U, because it's live, and honestly, y'all, here I am in Austin, Texas. This week, also in my town, we've got South by Southwest going on, and I was so pleased. I mean, I've been going to South by Southwest for many, many years now, and we always fight to get accessibility integrated and mentioned on in their panels and in the things they're talking about. It's hot topics now. I mean, there were many that had accessibility as a focus and in their title, or inclusive design, inclusive this or that. But even in the other more general sessions, there were, things. They're talking about the future of AI. They talked about accessibility. They talked about accessibility throughout the programming. So I think if you go to technology conferences, you can seek out other people who have that consciousness, are talking about it, maybe they're on the exhibit floor, maybe they're one of the speakers, and you hear them mention accessibility. I think networking is a really, really great way, because as Rachael mentioned, as we build this community, one of the main purposes is to support each other and to help further the idea. Oh, IAAP too. Don't they have I think they have a job board. And Jennison does a jobs, he maintains a Twitter feed that's just about announcing accessibility jobs.
So in addition to our mentoring program, we actually have intern slots that we open up, and almost all of them are filled with people who want to change careers. And it's, I think, because it's so hard to find an internship when you're not in school as a professional that really works around already working. So I do think there is a specialty there that I will take an action, I guess, from this conversation to post something, and Sharon and Kate, if you'd be willing to help
Sure.
build out some more resources, because I do think it's a special case that we don't necessarily have it as flushed out as we want to, or at least as I'd like to see, because I do hear that as an issue that comes up an awful lot. Has its own special challenges.
Wonderful. Thank you for those recommendations. Next question here is about accessibility certifications. So this person is asking, when looking at accessibility certifications, how can we assess what is a valuable certification versus a quote unquote fluff certification? Any recommendations?
So I will start by saying that I think based on where you are in your career, certifications have different value. I think especially if you are getting started, going through the IAAP, it really gives you a base knowledge. And in fact, we slightly prioritize in the mentoring program people who have been through that, or something similar like having gone to Access U, something that had given them a base knowledge, so that when you start getting into the more technical detail and the more complicated questions, you have that as to start from. But I think there's a lot of potential value there. It's really just for me, when I advise on it, it's around what your current circumstances are.
Yeah, this is Kate speaking. I would echo what Rachael said around where you are in your sort of career, what industry you're working in. So specific to kind of higher education, for example, certificates or certification can be different things as well. There is a really great graduate certificate that the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign offers. It's called the Information Accessibility Design and Policy Certificate. So this is a university offering it. So if you're someone who's working in higher education or education, you know, that type of certificate might be very useful to your position. So or your work. So I agree, you know, depending on where you're coming from, different certificates or certifications might mean different things to the work that you're doing.
So one option would be to look at some of the jobs you might be interested in and see if they're requiring the certification and what that certification is. I think that's one of the best ways, if you're not already in the field, to figure out what you should be focusing on.
Awesome. So what would you recommend for this participant who states, I have accessibility experience, assistive technology specialist in K through 12, and have my CPACC, but does not have programming or design experience? How would you help this person break into the market?
Well, I would say that it's given that background, in order to be skilled at doing audits and reporting, I think it's really not necessary to be a programmer. I think it helps when you get to the remediation stage, but in terms of breaking in as a career, some of these volunteer activities, the mentoring programs, being involved with organizations that do accessibility, like we're 3 nonprofits. There are many, many more. I think you can volunteer at IAAP. There are other mentoring initiatives. So volunteer, learn through doing, and believe me, the industry right now is looking for people who are willing to learn. I think a lot of places, if you have the skills that you mentioned, are quite valuable. AT experience, understanding the world and the experience of people with disabilities, it's extremely valuable. And there are a lot of organizations that would take someone with those skills and be willing to invest in training.
Yeah, and this is Kate speaking, I would add on, for what it's worth, I don't have a background in programming or development, but there are many ways to be involved in this community. So kind of calling back to Rachael's point earlier, what kind of job interests you, and looking at what the qualifications are there. Certainly having the background in education that you have, an understanding of disability, you know, there are certainly roles like product manager, you know, working on different teams, tech company teams, for example, that we work with at Teach Access, aren't necessarily doing programming or coding around accessibility, but they're kind of that connective tissue, if you will, between the programmers and maybe the users. So that could be maybe some of the UX space, for example. So there's all sorts of ways that you can contribute and be a part of accessibility work that doesn't have to be doing the programming or coding of a website, for example. So really thinking about what is it that you get excited about doing. Is it talking with people? Maybe there's a space for you, and thinking about you know, the policy aspect of an organization. How can you affect change that way, for example? So there's all sorts of ways. So it's not, you know, don't be discouraged if that isn't your background. That's true for many people working in accessibility.
Grace, can we see if we answered that question? I wanted to be sure that we got, can the person say if they felt like they got the answer?
Yeah, so whoever entered that question, either submit another Q&A saying that's great, or more explanation is needed, or put it in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. This person writes, I'm a front-end developer in Canada. Can any of the speakers mention any similar organizations that operate in or from Canada?
So I will say the mentoring program at this point is worldwide. So while we are operating in the US, we have people from most continents at this point. So it's growing, but that would certainly be a possibility. Trying to think of other nonprofits in Canada.
Well, you can participate in AIR wherever you are. We had a team last year. They had some Googlers in New York, I think some IBMers in Australia. I forget, they were all over the place. And they created a website for a nonprofit public radio station in Nairobi. So it was pretty fun. And I mean, it had their communication challenges, but certainly you can participate from Canada.
Super. Another question about Canada. This question is directed at Kate. Is there any interest in expanding the work Teach Access does to Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're operating with a 3-year strategic plan right now. And there are a number of things that are involved in that. One of those is figuring out how to thoughtfully expand the work that we're doing internationally, as well as in the K-12 space, because of course that is a space that we certainly can be doing this work. So we're really planning that is part of what we're doing. So yes, stay tuned very soon. At the very least, you can always sign up for our newsletter, which you can find on our site, the contact page. That's a way that as we get ready to scale out that way, we will be sharing that out. But yes, we definitely have plans to bring in more people across the world in this work.
Great news. Next question says, is there room for a more formal apprenticeship program as opposed to mentoring? Has that been explored at all?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because my staff was just talking about this at our staff meeting yesterday about whether it was time for us to start an internship program because of the fact that we do get so many questions from companies that really, I mean, Kate touched on it when she was going through her slides, but people are eager. I mean, accessibility now is trying to be part of the diversity and inclusion, but it's more complex, I think, maybe than some of the other aspects. And so there are technical supports that are needed and things that people have to figure out. But to demonstrate corporate social responsibility, companies really want to be more proactive in this space. And so they definitely are looking for people. And I think an internship program is a great idea. And whoever asked that question, you can write to me offline, and because we really are seriously considering this may be something that the community really needs and figure out how to set one up. I don't know, Kate, are you all thinking about it at Teach Access?
Great question. We also get this question a lot. So Sharon, I'm very excited to know you're talking about it. Maybe this is a thing we all do together.
Yeah, maybe we can do it together.
Yeah, we hear this a lot. And actually our friends at Pete, who I had mentioned earlier, they have a program called, it's PIA, the Partnership on Inclusive Apprenticeships. I think I have that right. If I don't, it's close. But if you go to Pete, PEATWORKS.org, that's PeteWorks.org, you should be able to find it there. But they're doing a lot of work around apprenticeships as well. I'm not as familiar with exactly the PIA or PIA program, what that entails, but they're closely working with a lot of similar organizations to ours and across the US around apprenticeship, because they're also hearing this as well. So I suspect many of us will be figuring this out soon. We as Teach Access are still, based on the capacity we have, we're a team of 2 full-time staff. we're trying to be thoughtful in the ways that we engage. So being able to partner with people in doing something like that would be ideal for us. But it is absolutely something we get asked as well. And especially, you know, how, you know, if you aren't in college student right now or university student, how can you learn about accessibility, which we've already gotten some questions around that. So yeah, there's a lot of work left to do. So we need everybody to help.
Kate, is Pete part of the Department of Labor?
They have funding. I think they have some grants that they operate on. I think the PIA program, I shouldn't say that. I don't know for sure, but
that's
yes.
all right. That's okay. It's probably
Pete definitely
irrelevant anyway. I just wondered if I thought maybe somehow I thought it was part of the Department of Labor, but
they have strong ties. They work with Department of Labor on a lot of their programming. So I know that there's some funding, I think, that they receive, but yeah, they're working really closely with the apprenticeship work that the Department of Labor is interested in.
Excellent. And it looks like a couple of folks in the chat are mentioning that the UK has been developing a digital accessibility apprenticeship program, and we actually have an AXCON session tomorrow that somebody is presenting about that. So if the audience is interested in, I guess, the kind of dynamic of apprenticeship and maybe how it's done in another country, definitely check that one out. Also, the attendee who wrote in with the question about jobs and coding experience said yes, the question was answered, and would love to talk with any or all of our presenters about job hunting.
great.
All right, next question here. This person is asking, can an accessibility central office benefit from having a diverse background, I'm assuming of people, that includes champions and those who know culture?
Now, I'm not sure I understood exactly. Did
So
one of y'all?
Yeah, could you reread it?
Sure. So this person asks, can an accessibility central office benefit from having a diverse background of people set to include champions and those who know culture? So this is talking about the makeup of accessibility teams.
Oh yeah, well, for sure. Accessibility is definitely not a solo thing. It has to be a team, and the more diverse, well, so many things. I think the more diverse you're going to get, better outcomes, the more diverse your team is. And that includes, you know, not just culture and ethnicity and race and that, but also disability. I mean, having people with disabilities front and center on those teams is really important. And not only the disabilities that we always think of the physical mobility, vision, hearing disabilities, but also mental illness, cognitive disabilities, the more invisible ones. I think the more, I mean, and it's a tricky thing to put the team together because maybe people who have invisible disabilities don't care to disclose it. So it's not like, oh, you can just snap your fingers and make it happen. But I think it's really, really important to do that as consciously and mindfully as you can. And just to remember that you have to have accessibility sort of checkpoints or stops throughout product development, throughout any project. You've got to have accessibility. I like the word champions that the person used. You know, you've got to have someone in place during every aspect of your product development life cycle.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we have time for another couple questions. This person asks, does Nobility offer any free programs outside of Access U or AIR?
Well, we do free webinars. Once a month, we have what we call Be a Digital Ally. or BADA. Acronyms drive me crazy, but yeah, be a digital ally. Those are just free 1-hour things on very basic topics, plain language, alt text, link text, those kinds of things, where it's just introductory. People don't have to be programmers. We try to keep costs low, but I should say Access U is not free. We have scholarships, but it's not a free program.
So I just
These
put
are free
some of those-
resources, though, at the Introduction to Web Accessibility there. Those are another hat I wear is the, I'm co-chair of the Education and Outreach Working Group at the W3C, and that Introduction to Web Accessibility is a free online course that's really comprehensive and quite good. And all those resources at the Web Accessibility Initiatives, those are all free resources. And Rachael, are you going to talk about, again,
Yes.
about your free tool?
Absolutely. So Tally.org, which is a11y.org, is also intended to be fully free. I should have mentioned we are an all volunteer organization. And so if you would like to volunteer, we're very much about giving credit because people are volunteering. So we do have volunteers who come in and help us write the content. And then as part of the byline to all of the content, they write their name at the bottom of it so that they can reference it as part of building their portfolio. So another option is to do volunteering, either doing assessments or doing content or working on building out that tool. It's meant to be a crowdsourced community tool as we all learn together. So that is also free. But I think there are a number of resources. What I run into with talking with people is a lot about just the repetition and experience. It's about having the confidence to go for the job once you've got the basic knowledge. And I want to go back to what I think, Sharon, you said earlier, which is just that there is so much need for this. And so the people are so interested in this and need to hire for this, that when you come in with a good solid basis, it is not, I think, as hard to get a position as you might think, because a lot of people are looking for it. So if you do take the time to get a certification or go to Access U or get the knowledge base and then get a little practice, I think you will be pleasantly surprised about the interest in this expertise out there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. All right, I think we have time for one more question. So this question is about resources or guidance recommendations on how to go about hiring a person with disabilities for your accessibility team.
Yeah, this is Kate speaking. There's a great organization called Inclusivelycom that is co-founded by a number of people who've been in the accessibility field for a long time. But they specifically are working to connect people with disabilities to jobs, all sorts of jobs. Any company can sign on to post jobs there. We've posted jobs there. I think definitely other organizations. I don't know if Nobility has. I can't remember, Sharon, if you have. Yeah. So Inclusively is great for connecting employers with candidates with disabilities. And they also have other support documentation as well. So that might be a place to check out. And it's inclusively.com is one that comes to mind.
I will also say jan.org is another one that provides a lot of information about accommodation. So if you are preparing to do that, it's a great place to get information on how to think about setting up your job and workplace to be accessible and inclusive.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you so much, Kate and Rachael, for the great presentation today and for everybody's questions. We are at time, but I do encourage everybody to take a look at the wonderful resources in the slide deck here. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of AXCon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.